Hello everyone, welcome to ServiceNow Mastery Series. So today in our topic, we are going to learn about the Glide Recorder, which is like the client side and the server side APIs, which we have already learned about. Why the Glide APIs are very much important in ServiceNow in our previous video. So, which is the core Glide API, which is shown in your screen as well. So, what is the Glide Recorder? Glide Record is the most important Glide API which is used to query and manipulate the records in ServiceNow tables. So, in our previous video, we have learned that in ServiceNow, SQL is not used, right? So in ServiceNow, whatever the functions and the features which SQL provide us, what is that? To perform the CRUD operation, create, read, update, and delete operations on the database, on the data. SQL function is that. So in the ServiceNow, we have its own API system, which is like the client side and the server side API, which is basically used these APIs to perform the CRUD operations in ServiceNow. So the Glide record is the most important Glide API, which is used to query and manipulate the records. If we want to perform any of the operations such as create, read, update, and delete operations on the records on the data in ServiceNow tables, then we can use a Glide recorder. So the common uses of the Glide record are fetch the record from the table, it insert the new records. So before just going deep dive into the Glide recorder, let me just tell you, in the previous video we have stopped on that note that we will learn server side API in our next video. So the Glide recorder is a server side API, and first we will learn all the server side APIs, and then after that the client side APIs we will learn. So server side APIs, server side means to fetch the data directly from the database, and the client side API is used to show the data onto the UI. So the common use of the Glide recorder is it fetch the records from the table. Whatever the records is there into the table, it will fetch out the records. It will help to insert any new records if it is there. If we want to enter any new record in the table, then the Glide recorder is also used. Another common use case is it update the existing record, and it also use to perform the deletion of the records. So basically all the CRUD operations, delete, read, update, and create. The basic operations of the Glide recorder is it query the records, it will add the condition, it will loop through the records. Another server side API is the Glide aggregate. So the Glide aggregate is also the server-side API. Glide aggregate is used to perform the database calculation like count, sum, average, min, max. It is mainly used in the reports and performance calculation. So think of it, you have a data, you have the list of the data, and like to tell me what all the incidents are there in which the state is in progress. So you can use the Glide aggregator, which will fetch out results from the database and perform the database calculation such as count. And if I tell you to sum, to perform the sum operation or to find the average, min, or max, so you can use the Glide aggregator server side API, and it's mainly used in the report or the performance calculation. Next is the Glide system. So Glide system GS is the global object which is used for logging messages, getting the system properties, fetching the user information, displaying the messages. For example, if it's a global object, first of all, and it is used for the logging messages. If you want to show any of the information, any of the error, or the logging user fetching the information or to get any of the property of that user, so getting the system properties, so we can use a Glide system like gs.info, gs.error, gs.getProperty, gs.getUser. Next is our Glide date and Glide date and time server side API. So these two are the APIs. One is the Glide date, another is the Glide date time. So as the date, It work only with the dates, and glide date time, it works with the date and time both. So the use cases are, it is used for the SLA calculations, service level agreement calculation, for the time comparisons, or for scheduling the logic we can use a glide date and time server side API. Another server side API is the glide user and glide session API. So glide user, which will provide the information about the login user. So whatever the information, like the first name, last name, uh, or the logged in user, even the manager details also you can find it out using the glide user um, server side API. And glide session server side API, it will provide the information about the current user session, like the session ID or the client IP address. So it will tell about the session information, current user session. Next is the client side APIs. So we have covered most of the server side APIs. Next is the client side glide API. Client side glide APIs are mostly useful. Client side glide APIs are useful to show the data on the UI. So the first glide API, which is most commonly used, is G underscore form. It is used to manipulate the form fields on the UI. The common actions are, it set the field values. G underscore form is a client side glide API. So it's used to manipulate the form fields on the UI. Whichever the form field is there, you can manipulate it on the UI. So the common actions is like set the field values, make the fields mandatory or read only, hide or show the fields. We can also use UI policy to do all these functions, to make the fields mandatory or read only, to make the fields visible. Right, we have practice a lot of examples on the UI as well, UI policy. So basically, client side scripting, we can also perform it using the client side glide APIs, which is like using the G underscore form. If we want to do somewhat complex scripting on the UI, so we can use a client side scripting and we can use a G underscore form on it. G underscore user, another is a client side glide API, which will provide the information about the login user on the client side. If you want to show, which is like the pop-up, if you want to show on the form itself that the login user email address is this, so you can use a G underscore user client side glide API. Another one, which is the most important and mostly used in the ServiceNow development, is the glide Ajax. It's used to call the server side script includer from the client scripts. So we will go into this glide Ajax in another session, which will be a very important session, and it will be a very long session. So for the time being, you just try to understand that a glide Ajax is used to call the server side script include. Now, as we have covered mostly user client side glide API, it's a time to see the advantages why we use the glide APIs. So as I have said it before as well, no direct SQL is required, secure way to access the data, easy to learn and use, and the platform optimized. It reduces the development time. These glide APIs are mostly useful and you can use it in your complex coding, and it will also reduce the development time. Somewhat limitations of the glide APIs are also like the client side APIs have the limited access. Heavy glide record usage can impact the performance. If you use so many of the glide recorder, so uses so many of the glide recorder in one function, so it will impact the performance. Incorrect queries may slow down the instances. So as I have said it before, if the queries are incorrect or not logical, it will slow down the instances. Best practices what we can follow is, we can use the encoded queries wherever the possible. Avoid the glide record in loops. I will tell you about this encoded queries in the examples which we will done in upcoming videos, like how you can use the encoded queries. Avoid the glide recorder in loops. Use the glide aggregate for calculations. So see, there are particular Glide APIs, instead of using the glide recorder and to fetch the results and then use to calculate the sum of the incidents, or to calculate the count of the incidents where the state is in progress, you can directly use a glide aggregator for calculation purpose. Prefer the script include for the reusable logic. So script includer, you can think it of as a function which is used for the reusable logic. Now, as a summary, I would say like the Glide API is the backbone of the ServiceNow scripting, is the backbone of the ServiceNow development. Understanding the Glide API is essential for everyone which is working in the ServiceNow administration or the development. It ensures a secure, efficient, and scalable interaction within the ServiceNow platform. With the use of the Glide API, with the understanding of the Glide API, you can master into the ServiceNow development. So this is it. This we have covered the full document. In our next video, we will start doing these server side and the client side APIs in our ServiceNow PDI. Till then, stay tuned. Bye bye.